Jack, welcome back.
Welcome back.
I don't know why I'm welcoming you back. I should welcome our audience back.
That's true.
Fair, but whatever. We're breaking the fourth wall.
We were just in here 2 days ago, so.
We were. This is big for us. 2 recordings in 1 week.
Yeah, it's huge. I love it.
I love it too. Honestly, I love sitting in this chair with you.
Me too.
Also, do you notice something? Sorry for our listeners and our viewers can see it. Do you notice anything?
Aside from your tits looking amazing.
Cut. No, I'm just kidding. But
Sorry, I had to say it because you said it. Thought it would
no,
be funny.
I'm wearing my Skims. I have not bought from Nike Women in a while, and I bought Nike Skims, and I'm obsessed with it.
But before you guys go to Nike.com and go buy your Skims stuff, make sure you like and subscribe to all of our channels, which include Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
We know, we've said it a million times, we are here for the Kardashians on this show.
Yeah, say less.
Skims, if it makes my butt look bigger and look great, I'm here for it.
No, that's
okay?
For sure.
Kim, you're an innovator. I'm sorry. It's true.
She's the best.
Y'all can hate me for that, but...
But more importantly, I want to get into who we are bringing on today to our show.
Very excited.
Dr. Chantelle Green, who is the Director of Mind, Health, and Wellness for the Portland Trailblazers. I had the privilege of sitting with her watching a Timbers game a few nights ago. Absolutely loved her story, loved her vibe, loved her energy. She was amazing. For me, the moment that I met her, I felt very comfortable. She was just someone that was so inviting, also very smart and very thoughtful with everything that she said, but also like a real human and someone that you could just get real with and very down to earth. And I loved her, and I thought she would be the absolute perfect person to come on our show and talk about mental health and the importance of that and how that it has, progressed from years on until where it is today. I think she's so dope, and I'm so excited to have her on the show.
I have to say I was so excited that you got to go to a Timbers game with her, and it got me wanting to research her a little bit more. And she is unbelievably accomplished. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you described her. She's so humble. She's so wonderful. But this is a woman who grew up playing basketball. She suffered an injury in high school and then really turned her attention to sports medicine. I always find that so fascinating, those tipping points for athletes and how they use that to actually help other people, just like you do. She went to the University of Florida. She has 2 master's degrees, 1 doctorate in clinical health and sports psychology. She's worked for both college and now professional level sports teams. Mm-hmm. She joined the Blazers in 2022 as the team's director of mind, health, and wellness, and just has obviously made a huge impact there. This is our second doc on Clack, so should we bring Doc on?
Bring Dr. Green in here. I cannot wait to have her sitting next to us.
Everybody, we have an incredible guest with us here today. We have Dr. Chantelle Green. She is the Director of Mind, Health, and Wellness for the Portland Trailblazers. Chantelle, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Girl, we are so happy to have you on the show. I was super excited when I met you a couple of weeks ago at the Timbers game. The main thing that drew me to you was your holistic approach to how you treat your athletes. For me, when I think of a sports psychologist or someone that's, within your role, I just think of like the mental aspect of it. But when you told me that you're in the gym and you're rebounding for these guys and you're doing work with them before and after practice, my mind was blown. So if you can kind of give us a little bit of what that looks like for you and how you approach your work.
Yeah, I think when I think about my players, I see them as family. And so I see my coaches as family. I see our whole building as family. And so wanting to be in an environment that you look forward to going to work and being able to help and just offer as much as you can at any moment. So when I walk in the building, it starts with just greeting everyone, right? Just saying your highs, saying your good mornings, and taking the psychologist hat off and just being a human first. And so I say that with my players all the time. I see you as people first, players second. And so when I have my check-ins, there's no ill intention. It's really, I genuinely want to know how you're doing. And so when I'm around the building and I ask, there's certain players that, and just in people in general, I think it's so quick to be like, I'm good. Or yeah, I'm fine. But there's certain ones that I know it's just their default answer that I'm like, nope, I need another answer. Give me some other word that describes how you're feeling right now. Because I think as a society, we're just so used to saying we're good even when we're not. Mm-hmm. And so thankfully, a lot of what I do is I've gotten to know my guys for so long that I know even before they answer the question what the answer will probably be. And then we just take some time to get to know them. So being as involved and as embedded as I am, so much of that comes from my organization, just empowering me to just be in the space and occupy the space in the way that best serves our players, serves our staff, serves our coaches. And then just being able to, like you said, I will rebound for our players, not out of selfish gain or wanting to look good. It's not performative. It's more of, can I help in this moment? Does it take some pressure off my coaches? Does it help my video guys? If it means they can go do something else and I can, as a former basketball player, to be on the court and just to be able to help any way that I can serve in the building, to do whatever I can to take any pressure off players, coaches, staff, I'll always be able to do that.
I love that. I think for me, when I think of that, I feel like you're building trust with the players. And if you're going to talk to me as an athlete and try and help me through X, Y, and Z, if you don't know who I am or like have any sense of what I'm about, I feel like that for me, I'm not bought in. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's an amazing way how you look at things. And I can absolutely understand that the organization behind you, based on what I know, them being a big advocate of that and helping you, be able to bring that out is amazing.
I think you bring up a great point. It's that ideal of, I was with you shooting in the gym, right? Yeah, like I was there during the highs and the lows. We were in it together.
100%.
Like, whether we're going from city to city, late night travel, all those things that we're doing, I'm not just talking about them, but I'm talking from an experience. And so being able to let them know that I can understand that struggle. I obviously don't know it from your player perspective, but I do know it from my perspective, and I'm just here to help you through it.
Wow. Yeah, I wasn't a professional athlete. I talk a lot about that on this show, but I think mental health is something that every single person struggles with. I don't think it's just certain people. I think it's everybody. I think it's a spectrum, and I'm by no means a professional. But as someone who's struggled with mental health for many ups and downs throughout my life and my career, I love hearing very specific examples of how experts like you are going into spaces where we've talked about mental health and what you went through. It's so accelerated because of the pressure and the eyeballs on you and the performance requirements. And so just knowing how important it is, your job in that organization, to protect the mental health of these players is, that's a huge responsibility.
Yeah. I think also being able to recognize, and something I like to demystify is, often we say that, like, hey, I struggle with my mental health. We all have mental health, and understanding that I think we've demystified mental health, and we actually want to demystify mental illness. And so we understand that it's on a continuum. So we all have mental health, right? The same way you have an arm, you have a leg, we all have mental health, but we often struggle to a level that we then say is mental illness. So when you hear diagnoses like anxiety, depression, ADHD, whatever the diagnosis you think of, that is someone who has a mental illness. And I think our work that we're doing to destigmatize is destigmatizing mental illness, getting access to care when it comes to mental illness. But we all have mental health. There are days when my mental health is great. There are days when I'm struggling with my mental health. So just being able to understand, and I think it's so important because so much of our conversations on a day-to-day is either I'm good or bad, my mental health is great, or my mental health is terrible, but it exists on a continuum, right? I can have good days where my mental health isn't where I want it to be today, but I'm also taking steps to get it back to where I want it to be.
Wow.
So I have a question for you. Obviously, I have a question for you. That's what we're doing here. On the days that you are not coping well, and when you're struggling with mental health, this is off the cuff, but I'm very curious. How do you give back so much of yourself and your energy when you're yourself not feeling great?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question, because it's so interesting. Anyone on the outside looking in sees me and I'm always full of energy, really happy. And that's like usually the first compliment that I get, which I always appreciate. But people who really know me know that I'm pretty much an introvert. Like, I enjoy being at the house. I do a lot of, I'm a puzzler, I'm a reader, watching movies, I'm scrolling, I'm doing all those things that are very isolating events, when it's just like, I always preach isolation can often cause or perpetuates many mental illnesses or mental health struggles. But for me, when I think about my social battery, I give so much of it at work, where it's just like, when I need my time to recharge, I use it as my time to recharge. So the same way you would go and fill up on gas because your gas tank's on E, I'm just hyper aware and very self-aware of how much I'm going to give in one space and how much I can give in the next space. And if it means that I don't have anything to give in the next space, I might not go to that next space. Okay. I'm going to give as much as I can at work because that's the space where I'm the happiest. And I have such great players that will come to me and say, like, Doc, you always check on me. How are you doing?
Right.
It's just like, cool. One, I appreciate you asking me that. Two, when my players are good, I'm good. And it's a genuine, it's not just me saying I'm good just because I'm good. It's, I can see that our team just did so well the other night. And even if we don't play well, it's, I've seen strides of certain people working on certain things and they're doing great in those areas. I can celebrate those moments. And so I find great joy in seeing other people doing well.
You just had a huge unlock for me, which is the difference but association between mental health and mental illness. And I recently had a friend pass away from something that happened with her mental illness, and I think it's really reframed for me because I've never really, I've definitely struggled with anxiety. Like, I've been very open about some of the things that I want to work on and I want to be aware of. And I think we're frankly the first generation that has like truly embraced it, but we have so much more work to do. And so I think for me, it is so rewarding to be able to sit down with someone who sits in these organizations, who's working with players and men, frankly, where I think mental health and mental illness for men has been very, very stigmatized. I mean, even we talked about this on one of our previous episodes. For me, Simone Biles getting up on that global stage and saying, I can't compete now because I have to take care of my health, my mental health, was that, I think that was a huge tipping point for society, especially for sports. And so, for me, it's just really rewarding to understand from you those differences in how we need to destigmatize, not just like mental health's over here, but also mental illness.
Yeah. And I think just being able to acknowledge the people who have told their stories. I think there's so much power in storytelling. That's why this podcast is amazing, because it allows space for people to tell stories, and people can hear that story and see themselves in stories. And so I think the power of storytelling is so important. And just hearing people stand out and say the things that other people have thought is so, and it's scary for the person who steps out and says, I'm going to be the one to say it. In that moment, they don't realize the impact and the ripples that they have for those that come behind them. But it's so much of the work that I do now is wanting to say the things and step into spaces for women, for Black women, to say the things that other people aren't willing to say, to hold space for people who maybe it's the first time they've actually, within the context of basketball, been able to say, you know what, I do want to talk about how I'm feeling outside of just how I perform. Someone who wants nothing from me, but just genuinely cares about how I'm doing. And I think there's so much of that when it comes to the work that I do, is wanting to be authentic, because players, their whole life, I mean, you don't make it to the NBA without having great skill throughout your life. And part of that is their whole lives, they've wondered who's actually here authentically for me, or who's here for what they can do for me. And so to be able to be in that space and to not be another person who's asking for something, I want for nothing. The most I want is for you to be happy.
Wow. That's amazing. How do you break through to these guys? Because as a former athlete, you grow up and you're taught to be strong. You're taught to push through everything. You're taught to, put your feelings to the side and, just push through. So I want to know, how do you break through to these 18 different players? And and this is two parts to the question. One, you have 18 players to manage. So I'm very curious to know how you are able to divvy that up and give them each, the attention that they need. And then how do you handle the stigma around, breaking through to these players?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, having worked in the collegiate space, it's a very different environment. But when I was working in the collegiate space, I would work women's basketball, men's and women's track and field. I worked with football. I worked with rowing. So you work with multiple teams. Wow. And so when I first got the job with the Portland Trailblazers, and I knew that my responsibility was at most 18 players, close to maybe 15 coaches, and then an entire staff, I was like, this is going to be easy, because my 18 players compared to my 35 player, track team is very different. And so coming in, I just knew that it was light compared to what I'd worked with in the past.
That's crazy.
In the collegiate space, I think any other collegiate mental health practitioner would know that once you transition to the NBA or you work in professional sports, it's just so different, just because the demand is very different. And interestingly enough, one thing that a lot of players didn't realize coming into the NBA, or I'm sure maybe even the WNBA, but a lot of it is you have so much free time. Like when you're in college, there's something called Teamworks. Literally the moment you wake up in the morning to the moment you go to sleep, your schedule is built out for you. So there's not a lot of free time. So one of the greatest struggles that my players deal with when they enter the NBA is, I have all this free time. Practice is over.
Facts.
We start at 11 o'clock. We're done by noon. I get my treatment, and then the rest of the day is mine. How do I occupy my time? The only thing I've ever known to do is play basketball, and now what else is there?
Right.
And so a lot of it, when it comes to getting to know my players and being able to invest my time and energy into the 18, that seems like a lot, but it's really not, is I think a lot of it is so proactive for me. I talk a lot about being proactive versus reactive. The proactive aspect is getting to know the guys literally in the draft process. So at that point, when a player comes in, I don't make decisions that ultimately decide whether we draft a player or not. My focus is just understanding the player so that if their name is called and they are coming to the Portland Trailblazers, what do I need to know? What systems do I need to have in place? What are some of their struggles? What motivates them when they are having a hard time? What's worked for them in the past? Put some things, systems in place to already have ready for them so that when we get there, we're not trying to figure out what are the things that they need. We already have things in place.
So, and I wanted to double down on a question you had just around, now we've kind of talked about volume, and now you went, which I think is fascinating, going from kids playing across a lot of different sports to specifically basketball, right? How do you take a more holistic approach to these players? Because I think that's something we've heard often too. It used to be so much about performance, how physiologically are you doing? Yeah. How are your biomechanics? But now it's about this, right? Yeah. And the holistic body. So what's your approach to that?
So that's a really big question, and it really shapes kind of the trajectory of my life. So I'll kind of give a little bit of a background. I played basketball my whole life. Any other sport I played, it was to stay in shape for basketball. So I swam, I ran, I did all those other things just to be in shape for basketball. So basketball, first love. And navigating playing sports, my senior year of high school, I ended up tearing my meniscus. And at that point, I was really fortunate. I was a big nerd, straight A student. Like, school was also kind of like in the back burner, but I did love just playing basketball. Mm-hmm. And from there, when I was in high school, I was an athletic training student. So I would work the events with players at that level. From there, when my injury happened, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to throw myself into being an athletic trainer. So I was already really passionate about injuries and how they happen and mechanism of injuries, treatments for injuries, love taping and doing all the things as an athletic trainer.
I like the tape too.
So, right, it's my favorite. So
it feels ASMR-y a little bit.
Yeah, I can see it. So as an athletic trainer, I loved just being involved in sports. So if I'm not playing, still being able to be in the space of sports. So I worked as an athletic trainer. And from there, after my injury happened, I knew going into college, I was going to pursue athletic training. So I got my degree in athletic training.
Very cool.
So at that point, my background was in the physical aspect of sports. I knew mechanisms of injuries, when they happened, timelines of rehab and treatment. So at that point, I was really passionate about the physical. My junior year of college, within my athletic training program, we took a sports psych class. And that was my introduction to sports psychology. And I was like, oh, this is a different world. And so I would start to take the things I would learn in my class I was working football at the time. I would take them into the training room and just look for moments where I would see the things that were discussed in my classrooms unfolding. And so I would just kind of take mental note of them. And I started to realize everything tied back to our brains, how we thought, how we approach life, how we approach practice, how we communicate, how we integrate with one another. And so from there, I just really started to understand that so much of this game is not just physical, but so much of it is mental. And so if I take the epitome of my entire career, from athletic training, sports psychology, then to clinical psychology, I then understood that I was in a position to not only take care of the physical aspect of an athlete, but also the brain.
Wow, you're like the secret weapon. Seriously, my best friend grew up in athletic training. That's what she was for so long. Yeah. And I think she talked to me when I was with her last about the challenges on the mental health side of things and just no support, no infrastructure. And I think it's so interesting that you started there and then you saw this deep connection with the brain and really then committed your life to taking this more holistic approach. And I think probably more people would benefit and more leagues and teams would benefit from having people like you have really been able to see both sides.
One thing I'm really proud of is athletic training programs now requiring a level of understanding of the mental aspects. So psychosocial aspects of injuries. It was actually, when I was in grad school, I was a TA for the undergrad program, athletic training program, teaching psychosocial aspects of injuries. And so it was part of their credentialing exam. For them to get licensed, they would have to be able to respond to how they would integrate the mental aspect of injuries, how they would make referrals, making sure that they knew what resources exist within the university setting, high school settings, college spaces, professional spaces, being able to see when the problem is bigger than just the physical and be able to make referrals. So they're moving in that direction.
So you've worked a lot with different genders. You talked about working more in the collegiate space, across many sports, different genders, and now you're working in men's teams. This is something I think about a lot, the difference between men's and women's health, and the stigmas are different, the needs are different. From your perspective, how do you think about that, and how different are they?
Yeah, I think when I think about disparities, there's certain mental illnesses that predominantly happen within women, others that happen predominantly within men, Within the sport context, again, I take an approach where I see everyone as human first. I don't see gender first. But I do think there are certain things that certain genders find themselves gravitating towards. There are certain behaviors that you can anticipate with one gender versus the other. One of the things that often when we think about education, there's externalizing versus internalizing disorders that we often see. So the way that things happen within women, a lot of it is internalized. So when we think about anxiety, we think about depression, a lot of that is our own internal processes of our own experiences. Often when it comes to men, we usually have a reaction to externalized behaviors. So internalized experiences for women versus externalized behaviors for men. Substance abuse, whether they're spending, they're outwardly a lot more anger. We see a lot of substance abuse that happens within men versus women. It's a lot more internalized. I'm struggling on my own, whether it's I'm dealing with anxiety on a day-to-day, I'm depressed and I can't get out of my house, I'm isolating. A lot of those are internalized experiences versus men. We often are treating the outside behavior.
Interesting. Okay. Do you ever see any overlap, or is that genuinely, is it pretty separate?
So with everything, I think there's overlap just because we think about the intersectionality of so many different spaces. But I do think that obviously there are women who also struggle with substance use in that same way, or they do have these externalized behaviors. And there are men who also suffer in the same way with isolation, with dealing with anxiety, dealing with depression. I just think those are just the commonalities. Those are the things that you can expect. And so even as young as kids, we usually expect that hyperactivity, it's usually more associated with males. And so that's why many women go undiagnosed with ADHD up until their adult years when they start to realize that it's usually inattentive more than hyperactive. And we start to see that the diagnosis happen later on in life for women than it does for men, because it's outward behavior of not being able to sit still when they're, young boys, that they often are encouraged to get tested for ADHD versus women. It's usually they're noticing that it's struggles in their day-to-day function that leads them to get the diagnosis of ADHD.
So we talk a lot about injury on our show. I've been injured a lot. I'm curious, what is your approach to when you are helping athletes either come back from injury or prevent injury?
Yeah, so two very, very different things. I think my approach is different in each. From the minute an injury happens, being able to offer space for a player to just experience what they experience. And different players react differently to their injuries. The first thing that I make sure a player understands is early on, especially depending on if it's an acute injury, so short-term level of rehab versus long-term, and that's the benefit of being an athletic trainer is I kind of have an idea when an injury happens versus someone who maybe doesn't understand the context of injuries. But when an injury does happen, being able to just offer space of how are you feeling, but genuinely wanting to know physically how you're feeling and then emotionally what's the reaction to how your body's feeling. The other step to that is just understanding that in that moment, grieving that your body is no longer doing what you built it up to be able to do. And then we essentially can go through the stages of grief. Kubler-Ross, stages of grief, we often talk about after the loss of a loved one, but it's very similar when it comes to an injury. We can see some of the same reactions, whether it's denial, there's no way I just felt that injury. There's no way I heard that pop or I felt that. There's usually that denial. Then we kind of go into the anger. We often feel depression especially as the rehab time goes longer and longer. We get to a place of bargaining, like if I can get better from this one, I promise I'll take care of my body in a different way than I ever did. And then eventually we come to a place of acceptance. That's usually kind of as you progress through your rehab, the pain starts to go away. You feel a little bit better. You feel like you trust your rehab process. Then all of a sudden we get to that place of acceptance, but that process is not linear, right? We can bounce from, I feel great, now I'm watching my teammates go out and play, and all of a sudden now I'm angry again. Then all of a sudden I'm in denial. There's no way that I'm not going to be able to play for the next month. Then all of a sudden it's just like, you know what, but I'm here for my teammates. I'm accepting that this is where I'm at. What can I get from this? And so just being able to support players as they navigate those different stages and being able to meet them where they are in each stage and find some level of reframe in those situations, right? How can we see it from a different perspective in those moments is so powerful.
Yeah, you're incredible. And I wish that I had that resource when I played. Like at my university at USC, we had like someone there that was there to support us, all of us. It was like one or two people. And we're talking like 15 years ago now at this point, just age myself.
We're still young.
Yeah, but
as old as we feel.
Yes.
Yeah, but I can just imagine like how different my career would have been if I was able to just like peel back those layers and go through each of those steps And I think that is still why it's really hard for me today to talk about it. Like Elle and I talk about it all the time. We've actually had an episode where we interviewed each other, and she was trying to get stuff out of me, but it's still very hard for me to talk about. And it's because I've never truly been trained like how to cope with those feelings. And it's just, to me, it's just such an amazing thing to sit here and listen to you speak on this, because it's such a miss for so many players. And I'm so glad that the Blazers have you and they're able, to have you in their corner. It's just really amazing.
I appreciate that. And I think it really speaks to the power of therapy, right? Just having a safe space with no judgment to say the things that maybe I can't say to anyone else without feeling judged, without feeling like they're trying to present a solution, just to be able to say it. And I think the reaction that you're sharing is this ideal of, if I open the door and these emotions start to come up, am I going to be able to close the door back?
Yeah.
And often that's the fear. It's a fear of, I don't know what's on the other side, so I'm just going to stay here where it feels safe. And that's normal. It's a normal reaction to, this feels okay, even though I know I maybe could peek in and see what's there. Just in case, I'll just leave it there and just stay where I am because it feels comfortable.
No, you hit it right on the dot. Like, I lived in fear. I was like in a constant state of fear, just like opening up that door and trying to talk about it or figure out, how I could get through this mentally. I knew I was doing what I needed to do physically, but there's a reason why they say the mental part of the game is such a higher percentage than that. But yeah, living in fear was a real thing for me.
So in that vein, thinking about psychological hurdles, like psychology obviously plays a huge role in every step of that grieving process. And it was really fascinating to sit back and hear you talk about the different steps, because even in my own journey and things that have happened to me in my life, I think, I felt all those things. It brought me back to my own experiences the way it brought you back to your own experiences. So how do you help players who have pretty severe injuries? Like, how do you help them through those psychological hurdles and really help them keep moving forward?
Yeah, so I think just coping strategies. So as they go along the process, 1, allowing space for them to feel how they feel. 2, working in collaboration with their physical therapists, with their athletic trainers, just to really educate themselves on where they are and still feel empowered to have some level of control. Because I think once an injury happens, you're just left to trust your medical staff. You're in their hands. But ultimately, still, I want to understand what's happening. Why are we doing what we're doing? Being really inquisitive and just like learning and understanding where you are in this process. And what that does is, not only in dealing with this injury, but when other things happen in life, you have an idea of how to approach it, right? So whether it's another injury happens, this is what helped me when I was injured last time. Or if I have an understanding of how this happened, are there things I can do that will prevent me from dealing with injuries in the future? Is it, whether it's my diet, whether it's my sleep, whether it's hydration, are there things mechanically that I should make some adjustments on? So seeing it as a learning opportunity rather than it's only a setback. And so this is an analogy that I use with my athletes. If I were to be laying down on the floor and an elephant is standing above me, I would be terrified, right? Like, that's a scary place to be. I'm laying under this elephant. It's above me. At any moment, it can crush me.
That's wild.
That is a scary thought. I actually saw that when I first came out. I was like, oh, there's an elephant.
I was like, if that elephant flew in at this moment.
Think about it. So imagine and really visualize yourself under that elephant. The reactions that you would have. Physically, your reactions. Emotionally, your body would physiologically have a reaction. Mentally, you'd start to come up with all these scenarios and these narratives, and we do what we call ruminate. In those instances, that is the worst place that you feel like you can be. Now, if we're able to shift our perspective and we're standing next to that elephant, you're 50 feet away, you're at the zoo, that same thing that was very scary to us becomes a beautiful sight. It's amazing to sit and look at this beautiful elephant because it's not a threat to me. When we feel anxious, when we feel overwhelmed, it's because our perspective is from under that elephant. Versus if you're at the zoo, it's like, I'm looking at this elephant and it's beautiful. It's similar, and it's really difficult, obviously, to speak from the outside to someone who's injured. But in that moment, it's like you're laying under the elephant when it first happens. Like, this is the worst place we want to be. Eventually, with time, we're going to move from under the elephant. You're going to start to feel better. It's no longer going to be in pain. Range of motion is going to increase. You're going to start to feel like you can do the things that you used to be able to do. And you're moving further and further back, looking at that elephant, and it's just like, you know what? I can look at that elephant and it's beautiful.
I felt like I'm using that analogy for the rest of time. When I'm feeling stressed, I'm going to say I'm feeling like I'm under an elephant right now.
Yeah.
Because, again, I think you do such a beautiful job painting a picture that you can feel. And it makes me feel like I could actually solve these problems. And I think a lot of us don't communicate that way. Where it's like, imagine this. Let me help paint a picture of this. And those analogies can change, like my whole thinking has been reframed. I had a very stressful day today. And I was like, all I could feel was like, I'm under the elephant. I'm under the elephant right now.
And it's, like you said, it's perspective, you know? And like, I wish that I understood the power of perspective back then. Yeah. And I think now as an adult with, you know, personal therapy and couples therapy and all the therapy that I've done to work on myself, not necessarily like about my injuries or anything from the past, but it is a lot perspective. And her and I talk about this all the time, like the way we look at certain things, or some, you know, something happens and I try and help her with the way she frames things and her perspective, and vice versa. But it's like, it really, the mind is so powerful, and having someone like you to coach you through these moments is just so valuable.
And so much of that is understanding that our brains are hardwired for survival.
Right.
Right? Like, it's looking for, is this dangerous? Do I need to save her? Is it okay? And so we see negative in all things, but it takes true intention and making an executive decision to decide that I'm going to choose joy. I'm going to choose to focus on what's positive. I'm going to find ways to, whether it's through affirmations, through journaling, through gratitude, being able to remind myself that there is good in the world. Right now, I just feel like I'm under the elephant, but I know eventually I'm going to be able to look at the elephant from a different perspective.
Sorry, this just brought something to my attention. I know with mental health and sports psychology, the player and the athlete, they have to put in the work. It can't just be a session with you, right? And I think that as athletes, it's probably easy just to go into a meeting with you or a session with you and just say, okay. But how much of it is putting in the work outside of that?
Yeah, I think one of the things I always tell my athletes is I want to work myself out of a job, right? I want to no longer be needed. Yeah. And I know that will never be the case because there's always something. But working to the point where let's work on these skills. Let's talk about the things that you want to apply and then go out and apply them. Yeah. Which is the reason that you likely won't see your therapist every day. You see your therapist maybe once a week. And so in that first meeting, it's what are the things we want to work on between now and the next time we meet? And during that time, what are your actionable steps? And so that is another one of those differences that I see between working with males and females. In the time that I've worked with males, a lot of it is give me a solution, right? It's solution focused, it's performance driven, versus working with a lot of my women, it was, I just want to process this. I just want a space to just say the things that I haven't been able to say, or I just want to make sure that I'm not crazy, right? Like, I'm not crazy for thinking that, right? And so it's just validation, and it's normalizing, and it's understanding, and not feeling alone in the way that they're feeling. Versus men, it's just like, give me a solution. And so being able to hold space for my guys to actually acknowledge, well, yes, we will come up with a solution before you walk out of here, but I just want to understand how you feel before we get there, right? There's some steps to this, like, and there's power in both, right? With my women, I want to, yes, we can talk about how we feel, but I also want to see what are the actionable steps you're going to take when we come out of here. So we're not talking about the same thing week to week. And with my guys, it's like, no, I know you want to get to the solution. What are some of the steps to understand why we got here? How do we feel before we get there? And so just seeing the differences there is powerful. I'm literally, you painted this picture for me. I was sitting, my husband and I have done couples therapy, which I think is really important. We need to get back to it. Yeah. It's such a journey. But literally our approach to communication in that room was exactly what you were saying. Yeah. Like, Nick wanted a solution. Yeah. He's like, what did you think? Did we get what we needed? And I was like, I need to process this and just say whatever, you know, and it was seriously that. So it was really, it's so interesting. And then there's power in both. There's power absolutely both. So much power in both. So we did talk a little bit about stigma earlier on in this episode. And I think it's still a problem. I mean, just generally is. And we talked about Simone Biles getting up, talking, and she still got a lot of flack for that, which was insane to me. Because I actually told her on one of our recent episodes that was a moment for me that made me actually address my own mental health. And the power of that to change people's lives when people at that level take that accountability publicly. And so you're working with very public figures. How do you feel like mental health has evolved as far as the stigma from your perspective, especially in the men's game? Yeah, so I would say, one, my role exists because of those who've spoken out against the disparities and the lack of resources. So Kevin Love, who was one of the first to really verbalize his experience with panic attacks and anxiety. There's many other players who've spoken out since, but I would say Kevin Love is the first one that really comes to mind. Paul George being another one, DeMar DeRozan. These are players who've been really vocal about their experiences, which goes back to why I say sharing your lived experiences and telling your story really just has that ripple effect. And so my role doesn't exist if Kevin Love doesn't come out and say, this was my experience. And the NBA then looking back and saying, you know what, we are now going to mandate, this is back in 2019, I believe, we're going to mandate that every NBA team has a mental health provider as well as a psychiatrist that can manage higher level of mental health illnesses. But being able to say, hey, every team, whether how much you utilize them, how integrated they are, we leave that up to you.
Yeah.
But you are all required to have a designated individual that should an instance like that happen, whatever it is, there is a person that they know that they can go to. And so for that to be something that came through someone stepping out and saying, Kevin Love deciding and sharing very publicly what his experience was, I don't exist. My job, my role doesn't exist without that. And from that, right, so Kevin Love not even realizing that his experience trickles into the WNBA saying, well, if the guys get this, then why don't we the following year for the WNBA to also be fighting for the same thing? And it's hard to hear that it's fighting because it's just, you would never have a basketball game without an athletic trainer. You would never have a sporting event where if something where a player were to go down on the court, if something were to happen, there's no like, do we have an athletic trainer? There's no question. Similarly, if something were to happen in the instance of a game, whatever that might be, do you have a person that's readily available to your players? And that's where I really am grateful to be a part of the Portland Trailblazers, where I'm fully integrated. I travel full time. I'm with them. My office is in the building. I'm able to feel like a part, and it's not like a when you need me, I call. It's she's already here.
Yeah.
Because so much of it is the motivation to actually, when the moment happens, that you don't want it to be, I have to make a phone call and find that person. You want to already know where that person is. Similar, you don't want to be looking for the emergency exits when a fire is happening. You want to already know where it is. And so the minute the fire happens, I'm able to get out.
I know that has to be so impactful for these players because in 2021, when I was working for a WNBA organization, there was like a team psychologist that was available and around when needed. None of the players ever saw this person, not once. So it was like, if you need help, you have a resource you can call, set something up, right? So just the level of impact that I'm sure that is, I can't wait to see how things really progress on the women's side, because having someone there that could travel with you, someone so invested like yourself to be there at practice, I can't imagine how helpful that's going to be to these women. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the availability of mental health resources today versus what it was like, in your opinion, let's say several years ago.
Yeah. So one of the stories I think about the W, I very vividly remember Shamika Hoslaw going through, she was later diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but publicly her mental health was kind of put on display.
Yeah.
And in that instance, I just remember looking back at stories like that and just wanting to protect her.
Yeah.
And so later on, realizing while I wanted to protect her, there's, similar to Kevin Love, there's value in her speaking out. And you never want to have someone's mental illness put on display, but there's also the lesson that comes from that and letting it not be for naught. Her coming out and sharing, I remember later on, Liz Cambridge came out and kind of shared her story. And it was kind of that trickle of just like, wow, hearing you say that connects with something that I've experienced, and now I feel empowered to speak out. And so thinking about the resources that exist, I remember I read an article, and I remember Shamika Hoslaw was saying, I remember I used to have to pay $350 to go and see my psychiatrist, but you would spend thousands of dollars on MRIs if I needed them. And so even in that, being able to understand that this is something that you want my talents to help you win championships, but do you care to protect me in the same way you protect my knee, protect my shoulder, protect my back, protect my mind in the same way? And so seeing the disparities of, even if it didn't exist then, they were left to pay for it on their own. They were left to figure it out. And so much of that is, do I have to choose between my mental health and my finances, right? At that point, how much am I getting paid in the W? Being able to say, like, I'm choosing between the two versus, like, it's a no-brainer. This should be covered because it's another part of what helps me do my job. My brain, everything functions through it. And so being able to just hear that and see that just gave perspective on not only having the resource available, but do you encourage it to be utilized? And that's the next step, right? That's the part of understanding, again, within my organization, being really fortunate to have a general manager that's hands off. He's just like, do whatever you need to do to take care of our players. And I ask no questions, versus others that see it as like a tool. Like, is this player good to go? Should we trade them? Or having an approach where the person can be trusted, because so much of it is confidentiality? Is it this person, the things that I'm saying to them ever going to be used against me? There has to be a level of trust to not only be in the space, but to be trusted as a resource in the space is so important.
God, that's so well said. Yeah. And as I sit here and I'm thinking about everything that you're saying, my hope for men and women in the NBA, WNBA, all different sports, I know I've seen so many players transition out of sport and that be the hardest time in their life. Yeah. And it would be amazing to have the resource of someone like yourself that was able to stick with them for 2 years through that transition. Because we talk a lot about athlete transitions. And I think, you know, I've had a number of different friends and former WNBA players that have hit rock bottom after they retired. And I think that, you know, it's really important for them to still have that and not have to go out and seek something else. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it goes back to perspective, right? Like as they're transitioning out, being able to have that person that can highlight what I call transferable skills. The skills of being someone who can manage their time, communication, leadership, being able to do all of those things on the court and translating them off the court. So being able to just offer that perspective, right? What are some of the things that you're great at?
Yeah.
What are areas that exist in this world that would be able to use the tools that you have and that you've garnered for so long in this capacity? How do we see it transfer into other areas? And being able to explore those things. So much of it, even I use that when players have long-term injuries. In that moment, let's start exploring the things that you have interest in, right? You have this time. What are the things that can, in this time, occupy your time? Players that go to museums on the road all the time. They're into art. They're into fashion. There are so many things that players care about outside of just basketball. They just don't always have the space and time to actually explore them. Right. So in that time, again, my perspective is I'm just out. Well, you're out in this capacity, but what are the areas that you're still in? And so being able to just think through those things and using that time when you have it, instead of just using it to think about all the things that are going wrong, how do we use it to celebrate the things that are going right?
Wow. Yeah, I think incredible. Just to kind of elaborate too, I think there's the identification as an athlete needing to figure out how to transfer those skills. That's the acknowledgement, right? I've mastered this craft. There must be skills that I can transfer to that next phase. But also, I think it's our job as society, as people that didn't grow up being professional athletes, to also embrace and welcome those athletes into new spaces to drive innovation. I mean, it's why we exist. Our brand literally exists to help show the intersection of women's sports and women's lives, because we want there to be that athlete mindset in more places and spaces, not just sports, right? Yeah. And because we know there's so much success that is garnered in those skills. And it's everybody's dream to have the athlete mindset. Yeah. It's why we watch sports. So just the way you're talking about that, I think, and you brought up such an important point about that life after sport piece. Additionally, we talk a lot about, you know, there's the skills of one-to-one communication, having experts like you in the room. We also know technology is evolving very fast. There's, you know, new apps like Calm. There's lots of different resources just in the tech space that are looking to address this. How have you felt that's benefited this space? And then where are there areas that maybe you're feeling a little bit nervous about?
Yeah, I would say when it comes to technology, I always say it's in addition to, not instead of. And so in these instances, there are just things that being in real time, body language, reactions, that AI, that Calm, that headspace, that these things just can't do.
Right.
And so being able to have your one-on-one moments with your therapist, with your provider, and then being able to say, you know what, these are the things that I've learned. I want to use these as tools to facilitate the changes that I'm already making. So whether it's I'm working on meditation, and I want to, in my own time, because my therapist isn't with me 24/7, in my alone time, when I'm at home and my mind is wandering, let me jump on the app and be able to use it to also practice my meditation. So similar when I say that there's things and tools and things that I encourage, my actionable steps I encourage my players to use when they're away, that's just another tool. And so not seeing it as the only thing, it's an additional thing. And so when I think about my practice now, the extent of that is I encourage, like, if in those moments you need to just have mindful meditation, being able to have that. When you're practicing your mindfulness and you need leaves on a stream playing in the background, you're struggling with sleep, it can be your background noise. I think those are all great.
Just additive support.
It's an added support. So never instead of, but only in addition to.
It's like we talk about, or I think about this a lot because I grew up in brand and marketing. And writing was something I always deeply loved. And now there's all these new tools that will write for you. And the way I still think about it, and I will always think this way, is that you should think about those tools as a companion, not as your only solution. Because then you reread them and you're like, whoa, this is not it. This gives me some good things to think about, but this isn't it. And so I really loved how you framed that.
Same.
Because I don't think we can ever lose the ability to make genuine human connection. Yeah. And I listened to another podcast. They talk a lot about isolation, driving rage in this country, and social media and these tools that are, they're weaponizing our ability to connect as real human beings. And so I'm sure that plays a role in your work too.
100%. I think even so much of the struggle is in isolation, right? I always say that there's the battle that's fought between our ears. And so if there's just noise that we feel like we're fighting against ourselves, there's power in catharsis, which is just saying out loud what I'm already thinking. The power of writing is slowing my brain down and making it catch up as I'm writing. There's a reason why instead of, I used to early on, encourage my players, just type it out. No, move away from typing and actually get a notebook and write out your thoughts. There's power in going back to the basics. So I often say, let's get down to the basics of writing out our thoughts, being able to speak out loud, even human interaction, players now. One of the things I've had coaches that will complain, even when I was in the collegiate space, is they just don't talk to each other. Yeah. They don't want to hang out. They just want to go play their video games. They don't want to hang out with each other. Versus back in the day, it's we're playing cards, we're going out, we're going to the clubs, we're going to dinner. They just don't do that anymore. It's all right, I'm in my new city. I'm going to get some food, go to my room, play video games. And that's as far as it goes. So then it translates to on the court when it's hey, we need you to verbalize where you are, how you're going to support. I'm the lone man. I'm communicating. It just goes away. And so now it is forced.
So
we have to actually,
selfishly a bit.
We actually have to teach more than we ever have that level of communication. And it shows up in so many different ways.
You know what you should do? I did this with my daughter. She's 6 years old. You actually, don't let me tell you what to do. But this is interesting. So we made fortune tellers. Do you remember the little fortune tellers? And it was so interesting because you both have to write things in them, little thought starters, things that are interesting and imaginative. And then there's an engagement part of it where you actually get to ask each other. Yeah. You get to do the little, what I'm talking about, the little fortune tellers?
Yeah, be in the PF and all of a sudden they're where did this come from? I'm giving you credit.
I'm telling you, I hadn't made a fortune teller in decades, okay? And it brought me back to those times in high school, pre-social media, almost pre-internet. Okay, we are fortunate that we grew up in that era, an era where we didn't have that. Yeah. And it made me also realize, and as I watch my kids grow up, that there is a power in what children, how they are evolving and learning, and things we can remember and embrace again. Yeah. And so I've been making little fortune tellers with Haley, and I'm this is really special. Maybe I will journal again. Maybe I'll write more. So anyway. Make a fortune teller.
There will be fortune tellers at the practice facility starting tomorrow.
With little Blazers logos.
100%. Where'd these come from?
Don't worry about it.
Don't ask questions. Just get to fortune telling.
So, Doc, we've made a ton of progress throughout the years in mental health. Where are the gaps, and where else do you think that we need to move forward?
I would say within sports, just standardizing that level of care. I think it's always interesting when you hear of certain organizations doing certain things. What I often worry is when my player gets traded or they go to another team, will they have that same experience? And so being able to know and trust that across different teams, that they will get the same experience, the same level of care, that there are people who care about them in the way that I care about them. Because what I would hate is for us to build this great foundation of them trusting and the stigma being broken and they're willing to share, and then they get traded or, something happens and they end up in another city and all of a sudden that's just gone and they're starting from the bottom up trying to build that connection. So being able to standardize that across leagues, so the W not having any discrepancies with what we see in the NBA and just knowing that it's a universal experience and it just becomes the norm. It's not the exception. We shouldn't celebrate. I'm so grateful that you guys are just celebrating what I'm able to do, but I want it to become the norm where it's just having that conversation in the same way there's an athletic trainer, physical therapist, strength coaches within these organizations across sports. You start to think about a sports psychologist and it just naturally exists and it's standardized across all leagues.
It's beautiful.
I might also just take it one step further. I think a lot of what you're doing in sports could be incredibly valuable in the way you think about it for everyday people. People that are fighting for, through adversity. People who have always wanted to achieve something, but maybe never had the strength, or maybe they were told they weren't good enough. You know, I always talk about this, but I had a dream of running a marathon. I did it after having 2 babies. And I really think that the endurance of what I built having children, it was the hardest thing I've ever done, pushing those babies out. One of them almost killed me. And I was like, I can do anything.
Yeah.
And so I think what you're doing is not only changing lives in the sports world, but my hope is that women who are listening to our show will hear these teachings and say, how can I apply them to my life? And I think that's a gift. So
I have one more question. This is off the cuff here, but I just thought of it because this was a real question. So I remember, back when I was playing, and there was like a team sports psychologist within the team. And I think that amongst players, there was a level of trust of, if we're telling our the team psychologist all of our issues and everything that we're going on, and our problems with the staff, and our problems with the organization, and our problems, with our teammates, how much of that is getting back to the staff, right? Because like, you're in a tough position, right? You're there to represent the Portland Trailblazers. You're also there to represent 18 of these different athletes. So there's the big goal in mind, which is the team, right? So I'm curious, how do you navigate that without confidentially saying anything that you cannot say with your athlete, but then also bridging the gap a little bit and helping the staff?
Yeah. I think what's really helpful is to create a place of just openness across departments. So I'm not the only person that they're often sharing their difficulties with. So if they're, in the training room and they're working with their physical therapist or their athletic trainer, being able to share and just empowering them, taking the time to share with me first, where we can kind of phrase it in a way that's not offensive, or say it, you've said it a few times. Because oftentimes when you share a story, the first time you say it, there's some hiccups, and you say it with a little bit more anger, and I'm really frustrated. I've said it a couple times. I can take the emotion out of it. I can see it from an objective view. We've thought it through. But then there's a level of communication with those at play. And a lot of times, like, again, it goes back to what are the actionable steps? We can talk about our frustrations with every person in this building. That changes nothing. What are the things that we actually want to do that will actually have change that not only affect you, but affect everyone? And so being able to empower the players to have those conversations with the powers that be, to say the things that they feel comfortable saying with me, and we can talk through how we then feel empowered to say them to the people who actually have the ability to change them.
I love that. I think that approach is absolutely perfect.
Wow. Because this is a community. And I love how you're encouraging just the process of, like, how do you deal with that big feeling? I mean, I'm doing that with my 6-year-old right now. How do you deal with that big feeling? And it's really big right now. And then how do you start to build it through that funnel so you can process it and maybe come back in a more healthy way? And so what you described to me was community, like building a really powerful, thoughtful community. But Doc, it was such an honor. I will be totally frank. I was so frazzled before all of this.
Same.
And I feel like you have grounded me and made me feel a little lighter, a little more internal. Like, I want to think about some things. And I'm just so grateful to have this show with you and be able to bring such incredible women like you on. And I really hope so many more women can hear your story. And we hope to be a small part of that.
I also feel grounded. I was also very frantic coming in here. I've had a really busy day with work, but I think your calmness and your approach and your wholesome just approach to what you do just fills me up in the best way. And I'm just very grateful that you took the time to come here and speak with us. I have so many one-on-one questions for you that I would love to just pick your brain and just be one-on-one with you at some point. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you guys.
Absolutely. Girl, you're so good.
You are,
dude.
Like, you kept us together. You kept us together.
Really funny.
No, I swear. That episode was fire.
I really felt so off my game before that interview, and sitting with her and listening to her was truly the most valuable hour I've had in a really long time. I mean, I'm like, how much do I owe you, Doc?
No,
because,
seriously.
I mean, what an incredible person. The way she distills information, the way she makes you feel seen and heard. And just also, I've heard a lot of I've went to a lot of therapists in the past, And honestly, I don't know if any of them did as good of a job helping me like paint real pictures that I could sit in and feel the way she did. And she's not even my therapist.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it was something.
I agree. For me, it was the trust piece. And I think as a player, it's hard to find people around you as a professional athlete that you can trust and someone who is invested in your well-being truly at the core.
Yeah.
And she was so real and she's so thoughtful and she's so intentional. And I absolutely love her approach to everything that she does. Every question that we had for her, every scenario, whatever it was, she just had a very thought out approach to everything. And I think for me, looking back on things and putting myself in these positions that she brought me back to, I was just wishing that I had her around me at that time, because she would have probably changed a lot for me and changed the trajectory of my career. Her amongst other professionals in this space, she's great. I'm sure there's other great ones too, but just now that we're here and mental health and these resources are becoming more of a thing, it just makes me feel a sense of calmness for these players because I know how much that's needed.
Giving her the ability to talk to more people outside of the team, I hope that parents will see it. Parents of student athletes, parents who are raising athletes, and say, I really need to be thinking about this with my student athletes. Because I imagine that journey and that psychology happens far before they ever make it to college or to those pro levels.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why we need to be talking about it more, because it just generates awareness, curiosity, and action.
I could not agree more. And if anyone's going to peel back stigma with these male athletes, it's someone like her.
Absolutely. So if you are listening to this episode and you are a parent of a student athlete or you are an athlete, we hope that you will really internalize some of this feedback that Doc shared and hopefully, help get yourself help if you need it. It's never too late to get yourself help. I say that every day. I'm always like, this is the week I'm going to go find a new therapist. And now I'm like, I need to do it.
Yeah.
I really need to do it.
She was amazing.
She really was. But anyways, Jack, I think we need a meditative moment.
I think I'm going to go to bed feeling really good.
I think so too. I might meditate tonight.
Yeah.
Should we meditate?
Let's do it.
Let's go, girl.
I mean, if we could just play her voice tonight before bed.
Oh my God, Doc on a sound machine.
She'll put my ass to sleep. No anxiety for me tonight.
In a great way.
Yeah.
All right, girl. Love you. Great episode.
Love you too. Our third season of Clack is sponsored by Portland Gear, creators of unique, high-quality products inspired by the heart and soul of Portland. Go check them out.